We have this ugly looking application, and now it's time to change that. Attached you find two CSS files, users list CSS and user item CSS, and you can replace yours with those files or simply copy the content you find in those files into your respective files. That's what I'll do here, just paste that all in. If you now save this, it reloads and doesn't look that much better. We still have this super huge image here, and just our text is a little bit differently formatted now. Now to change that, I prepared a separate component, which we will add to shared components, and there I'll create a new subfolder, UI elements, to have some core UI elements we need. And there you can paste in a component you also find attached. In the avatar zip file, you find an avatar.js and an avatar CSS file. Paste both into UI elements so that you have avatar.js in there and avatar CSS. We're not writing this from scratch because I don't want to bore you with writing more and more components. This is a component which has a div which wraps an image and which has some styling to properly style that image. And we can use this avatar component in our user item component now. So let's go back to user item, and in there import avatar from, going up 2 levels, shared components, UI elements, avatar. And then here replace this image tag, not the surrounding div, but the image tag, with avatar. And to avatar you need to pass an image prop, because if you inspect that component, I do expect the image and the alt prop, also a width prop, by the way. So I do pass in an image here and set this to props image, and the alt prop, which is set to props name. Now I'll not pass in a value for width and also not for class name and style. This component just is built such that it supports these special props, and later we might need that, but you don't have to use that. There are some default stylings, and if those are right for you, there is no need to change this. So we only pass the alt and the image prop, and if we now save this, this definitely looks better. Now, still not perfect though. We can still improve that. It will look better once we wrap our user component also into a link, because I have some styles set up for anchor tags. And I want to have a link because when we click the user, it already has a hover state, right? When I click the user, I want to be taken to all the places this user created. Now, we won't render a link with a regular, boring anchor tag though, because instead we again want to leverage React Router DOM and make sure that we don't have a real link, which would try to load a brand new page and therefore would reload our existing page, but that instead the React routing package, React Router DOM, can step in before a navigation happens, before a page reload happens, and block that default action from happening, and instead have a look at our configured routes here and load the appropriate React component. We want to give React Router DOM a chance of doing that. So here in user item, I will import something from React Router DOM, and that something is the link component. Under the hood, this wraps and renders an anchor tag, but it also adds this extra block the navigation logic. We use that inside of the list item, inside of the div here, but outside of that div which holds the image, we can add a link opening tag and then a closing tag after this inner div. And now on the link, you need to specify a to prop which defines where to you want to go. And this now actually will be a dynamic path. It's not always the same URL, because it is a URL that should reflect the ID of the user, because we want to load all the places for a given user later. So the idea is that later we have something like user ID places, for example, where user ID, of course, is dynamic and not always the same, because we will have multiple users. So to here is built with help of a dynamic expression, and hence we need curly braces. And then here I will use backticks to create a template literal, which means a string where we can easily inject values. And I want to go to slash and then inject the value, and that value will be props ID, so it will be the user ID, slash places, so that we always have a different link for every user. If we now save this, This looks way better. And now we can hover over this and click it, and nothing happens. But if you watch the bottom of your browser, you see that it will go to /userid/places. We just haven't added such a page yet, which is why at the moment nothing happens. But generally, this works, and that is of course amazing. Now, I'm still not entirely happy with the way this looks. I also want to add another utility component, which you also find attached to this video, to this lecture. And that's the card. The card zip file, if you extract it, holds a card.js and card.css file. Copy both into your shared components UI elements folder as well. This renders a simple div with some nice styling attached with a little drop shadow and so on. It gives us this card look you might know from other web pages. And now we can use this in user item as well. There, we can now also import the card, import card, from shared components, UI elements, card, and wrap our link with it. So inside of that inner div, but outside of the link, add card, and then close card after the link. And with that, it looks a bit worse actually, because now there's one thing we need to do. We now need to get rid of this div here, copy the class name first though, get rid of the opening and closing tag thereafter, and add the class name to card. Because card is a component that is able to accept a class name prop and merge it with its own classes. And with that, if we save this, we now have a nice look, rounded corners, this nice cardy look with a slight drop shadow, and I think this now looks really nice. Now, of course, still it's a relatively empty page and we will add more, but we are getting there. And at least now we have our list of users with only one user at the moment, but we could render more and we can click that user. So that is pretty nice. That is a nice first step. Now let's continue our work and let's add more and more components and then also at some point more and more logic.